Never know. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for your patience while we got everybody situated here in the meeting room. Another great work session ahead of us here today. It looks like we have almost everyone. It looks like maybe Tony and Linda and Liliana are hopefully going to join us. They might be running a little bit late. So I'm gonna go ahead and see what we see. All right. Here is our agenda for this afternoon. Again, this is a work session. So our objectives here are to review and discuss the community forum feedback. Hopefully you guys all had enough time to kind of look that over, hopefully digest some of it, and we can talk about some highlights, some surprises, and some things that you all feel are really integral for us as Southwest Decision Resources, in tandem with the city, to include in that report for kind of the forward-facing community report. So it'd be great to hear back from you guys on that. We will also be discussing and finalizing these next community engagement events, of which consist of the listening and learning sessions and the topical workshops, which would be in person, and the listening and learning would be virtual. So hopefully you guys got a chance to look at that document as well and kind of see how that looks, recognizing that Jessica and I and the city have some more explaining that we're more than happy to do if there are things that feel unclear or if there's things that need a little bit more discussion. So those are our two big objectives today. Is there anyone who needs to leave early today? Rick. I guess we'll allow it. Okay. So while I'm sharing screen, it's hard for me to see everybody's face. So I'll probably be going back and forth between sharing screen and not sharing screen, just because that way I can see everybody's faces. But we are going to go ahead and start with working group updates. I am going to use my participant list so I can keep track of everyone who's here tonight. So first on my list is Mary. Do you have any work group updates pertaining to all things community plan update?
No, I really don't. I just, the political stuff is heating up. Went to a very energizing meeting on Sunday, and the mayoral debate is tomorrow and on Facebook, I guess. But other than that, no.
Thank you. Monica.
Hi, no updates.
Okay. Great. Brian.
No update, just glad to be here.
Excellent, we're glad to have you. Anne.
I continue hearing positive feedback on the event, and folks hope that the events going forward are face-to-face. And I do have a ticket to the debate tomorrow night if somebody wants to use it.
Great. Chat with Anne if you would like that ticket. Mike.
No, I have nothing to add.
Okay. Rick.
Nothing to add.
Okay. Ernie. You're still on mute.
Still, it went okay.
There.
Nothing.
Now we gotcha.
Okay, nothing. All that for nothing.
Oh, I was really hoping you had a whole bunch of stuff to say. Okay. Excuse me, John.
The only thing I have to report is our Sky Mountain is getting ready for an event internal to us. So I was in a meeting and we were discussing the gathering. So I'll add to Anne that group, which is, as many of you might know, is made up of a lot of long-term, individual. Sky Mountain doesn't turn over houses very often. And so they were looking for more of this face-to-face. They all loved the event, and just kind of wanting to get into the meat of what, okay, we got all these issues, we know all the issues. The whole solution thing is really where I would say this group's anxiety is. So we all know that. We all know we are coming to that phase of trying to sort out what all this means. But in my world, those neighbors are all very concerned about, okay, we understand all the issues are not different than what we told you before, but we've got to get some big solutions out there. So, and I don't debate it a lot with them. I'm kind of listening. So I'll stop there.
Great. Well, maybe some outcomes of today's meeting can help guide some of your discussions. Maybe you could play a little facilitator role, John. Get some more input from your friends and neighbors. That might be great. Thank you for
Well,
that.
the one point I will say is they all feel they've inputted.
Okay, great.
They're now looking for, what's the answer?
Next steps, yeah.
And
Okay.
I think that's clearly what I've been, discussing is where are the, when do we get to alternatives? When do we get to what I would call real planning?
Okay. Thanks, John. Marcy.
I have no updates.
Okay. All right. Just making sure I got everyone from the work group before I queue up folks from the city. Did I get everyone who's here from the work group? Yeah. Okay, great. Molly, do you have any updates as it relates to community plan update?
I can just say that we had our first citizen healthcare action, or advisory group meeting on Monday, where we were talking about different issues around healthcare in Sedona. And we're going to have a follow-up meeting in a couple weeks. And after that, ideally, we'll be able to put together a report for our city manager, making some recommendations. So that will be forthcoming, that I think will help inform and give you some feedback on the healthcare angles.
Excellent. And as you feel appropriate, it'd probably be great to share that with this group as well. Josh.
I don't have much to add, but Cynthia and I went over all of this content that we emailed everybody last week. So we're just excited to see what everyone's thoughts are on the findings of the event. And so, yeah, I'm happy to be here also. Just like, who said that? Mike? I don't know who said that, but anyways.
Brian
Enough of me
said
talking.
happy to be here. Keegan, you're gonna go last, Cynthia.
Hi, everyone. Well, we're at week 5 in the Citizens Academy this Monday, and it's perfect timing because it's the community development team who are going to be presenting and probably going over the community plan update. So I'm really excited to get them in the know of what's happening with the update. They're a very vocal bunch of citizens, so I think they'll be able to help spread the news pretty well and get behind the community plan update. Carrie already said that I wrote, or someone said I did a city talk article. That was Cynthia, and I tried to mention the community plan update as much as possible. And I've been doing a few posts on social media. I'd like to keep up the momentum of what we accomplished at the first, of that community event. So if anyone has really good ideas, I'm all ears. Cynthia and I are talking about putting back up that word cloud. If you do follow the City of Sedona AZ on social, that's Instagram and Facebook, I asked people what they love about Sedona. That was a really interesting post because a lot of people couldn't find anything they love. So if you all wanted to go on Facebook and be a voice, that would be really wonderful. There's a lot to love as a resident, and people are only looking at the negatives. And it was almost like an experiment, and the community is just not super happy with what's happening. But a lot of you are, and you find positives in things, and that's what this community plan update is about. So I would love to hear you and see your participation if that's a method of communication that you like. That's about it for me.
Great. Thank you, Keegan. We'll do Cynthia, and then I see that Tony joined. So Cynthia, if you want to do your work group update for all things community plan update related, and then we can circle back to Tony.
I don't think I have anything to update because I'll talk about it in the agenda.
All your updates are covered from now until 5. Fantastic. Tony, welcome. We're just doing work group updates as it pertains to community plan update stuff, things that you've heard around the community, etc. Oh, lost her. Nope, she's back. Internet. Tony, if you're back, we're just doing a brief round robin of work group updates.
Oh, great. Thanks. Can you hear me okay?
Yep.
Great. So super excited for the agenda today. In the second hour, I was hoping that we could address as part of it, that engagement moving forward section is what does this team consider success in terms of like how many points of feedback or how many residents we want to actually hear from during the outreach process. And I'm sorry, I just joined ahead of doctor's appointment that went over. So maybe you've already covered this. I'm wondering, again, what would feel like success to us? Are we reaching people enough with this process too? I know we've mailed everyone in the city for September 7th. We tried with the survey, we had some snafus, but are there other things that we could do to kind of reach out to folks to make sure that we gave them every opportunity we could to provide feedback? But what is that number? Is it 1,200? Is it 2,500 people? Is it only 10? Will only 10,000 do? So I'd love to just get people's thoughts about that.
Great. Thanks for that, Tony, and we'll make sure to add that at that second hour. All right. Okay. So next on the agenda is kind of where we are. Where are we in this process? Recognizing some things morph, some things are adaptable, recognizing our endpoint is still our endpoint, and there's a lot of stuff to do between now and then. So I'm going to share this, and Cynthia, this is an updated timeline of which you all should have received in your email. Let me see if I can find it. There it is. God, my screen sharing is on point in the first 20 minutes. Go ahead, Cynthia.
Okay. So you've seen this before and I updated it. For some reason, we lost the little line as to where we are, but I think we all know we're October, just entering into phase 2. And so this took a little more modification than just changing dates and all of that, because we have shifted around some of our methodology under community input, such as the listen and learn sessions. And so I actually kind of retitled under phase 2, understanding the issues and identifying potential recommendations. And then you'll see similarly with the other phases is the way we're kind of going to make up time in a way is we're going to be doing things concurrently, because schedule wise at this point, we can't really afford to just be on this linear path and do one thing and then the next thing. And so you'll see things happening concurrently, everything from public meetings or focus groups to writing up either background info or potential recommendations, that sort of thing. But we're still shooting for the same end of 23 to try to wrap it up. So at this point, no major changes other than everything we've been talking about with our upcoming, what do we call them? The workshops and the listening and learning sessions.
Exactly. Thank you, Cynthia. So I had Cynthia before this explain to me what she meant by concurrently. And so just to reiterate, that's us and you all helping with community engagement strategies and events at the same time that the city and Josh and Cynthia working their tails off to compile data that has been received and write things and then receive more data and, you know, add to and edit. So those two things are happening concurrently. Thank you for that, Cynthia. Any questions from the group on kind of the timeline, where we're headed? How does it look?
Yeah, I want to jump in with some comments. I think we all did a great job, staff, Carrie, your team did a great job preparing for this event, but I think we all kind of felt it came together in the 11th hour, and could we do better as we looked further on? So if you, a little bit further forward. So if you go back, Cynthia, can you repost that? Your
timeline.
bar chart?
yeah. Yeah.
So for instance, in looking forward under understanding the issues, and then we go into plan revisions, at some point in time, you have this volume of issues that we've got. And so you've got 15 pages of them listed. These, you know, I understand parallel paths, concurrent activities, all of that, because there's, you know, there's kind of housekeeping work that can be done with, but if you just look at the meat and you say, okay, what are the big moves that we could make? They probably are going to be few, not, you know, because, you know, we're not starting with a clean slate of paper here with a plan. But my point is, I'm really anxious that we understand under plan revisions some significant alternate strategies of achieving success for some of these, you know, these major issues that keep churning about, we keep talking about. So what I'm looking for is a better plan of action than 3 months of plan revisions with a few dots below them. You know, how are we going to do it? So for instance, and I know we'll get into this, I was thinking forward, if you look at these 15 pages and you have all these items, you could begin to put these in various buckets so that we because we're going to be tested as to how well we listen, and did something just fall to the cutting room floor that, you know, somebody felt very important. And quite frankly, I'm a believer that there could be one good idea out there from one person that is as strong as, you know, 20 of the same comment from 20 different people. But if you went through this and you divided it up into buckets, like which of these comments might grow into policy statements, which of these might be more map oriented, whether it be land use, whether it be circulation, whether it be open space. And then as we now look at all this, do we as a advisory team see that there are missing areas that we want to go back and kind of retest the public's reaction to that? So I'll stop there, but my overall point is wanting more depth of process as we're now getting deeper into this, and we have to have some very significant, you know, hopefully very future-oriented, you know, results out of this, you know, 2-3 year process. So I'll stop there.
Thank you, John. I am always a fan of when partners use the word buckets for lumping things, because, you know, I'm a lumper, not a splitter. So I like the idea of that. I don't know how that approach sits with the rest of you, and especially I'd like to hear from Cynthia and Josh about those folks who have gone through the data immensely. If that starts to make sense, if you're already down that path, it would be great to hear from you on that.
And that's on our agenda, number 2 at 3:25.
Oh, well, we're at 3:27, so we're right on time.
Do we want to talk about the report part, or do you want me to jump to the discussion about the database?
Yeah, so I just want to round out the timeline. Thank you for bringing that up. It seems like a really great segue, John, but I want to make sure that others who, if they have any feedback on the timeline, if there's questions for Cynthia specific to the outreach and community engagement timeline, that we cover that before we move on. Right. Sounds like people are ready to move on. So yeah, go ahead, Cynthia. I think, we had talked about, that number one on the 3 for 25 part of the agenda, that's the data and summary of responses. We'd also really like to get some feedback from you all about how we craft this, if there's any kind of aha things, if there's any surprises or specific things that should be highlighted in the the public facing report to the community of all of this feedback that they provided during that event. And then we're going to move into kind of that updated issue identification document / database, of which you alluded to there, John. So Cynthia, do you have a preference on how we tackle this?
Maybe because since John just brought that up, we might as well start with that one. So we have been working on the data kind of coding and categorization since the survey. Jessica went through survey results and she got that started. Now that we're getting more data, and then Josh is on board, we are actually putting it into a different database, and we are refining our coding list, which are the buckets, if you will. So we have large buckets and we have little tiny buckets within the large buckets. And so like we've been debating how far down do we go as far as the little buckets. And honestly, it might be, like John said, there might be one nugget of information in there. It's a little tiny bucket, but it may end up being like a focus group meeting. And so that's kind of, that's what we foresee, or I foresee happening, is we're going to filter out all of these comments and get down to the substantive recommendations, suggestions, etc. And so we're already seeing that as we go through things, but we want to make sure that we are thorough and that we get everything accurately into the right buckets, and that information is then going to inform these discussions that we'll be having. And so there's a lot of data we'll be merging. We have data from the survey, which is a huge chunk of data. We have some from the website. We got quite a bit September 7th. Everything will end up getting merged into a single database that we can then sort out, and we can print out reports. If we have, let's say we have a focus group on, I don't know, e-bikes, we can go in and print out a report every time somebody mentioned e-bikes. So anyway, it's a project that we're kind of in the middle of this week, and we'll keep going. I don't think it's going to take that long, because we are right now just setting up the database itself. Once you kind of have that, then it can be automated kind of from there. So anyway, that's happening now, and that hopefully answers John's question. So.
Yeah, and to that point, Cynthia, I mean, we can kind of see the bucket categories, right, in that data document that you sent out. And thank you guys for doing that. That was really helpful. Have you put some of those buckets into bigger buckets? Like John was mentioning, like, is this a policy? Are all these comments things that can be funneled into policy, or are all these comments something that can be funneled into, like, I guess to John's point of like, how big are the buckets?
Oh, well, to me, the question is, how small should the buckets become? But an example of the type of things that we have in-depth discussions about is whether or not we might be categorizing things more internally as, is this an opinion or is it a suggestion? Because from our point of view, an opinion is just somebody saying, I don't like this. Whereas a suggestion is somebody saying, why don't you try doing this, you know, a potential strategy. And so we're trying to filter those out so that we can zero in on the proposed strategies that could become policies, the ideas that have merit for further discussion with like a focus group or a workshop. So.
Okay. Any questions for the city on that data document? Anything that you all saw on there that you guys were all there at the community event? So most of that shouldn't be too surprising, but for those of us who are not manning a table or womaning a table, and we're kind of floating around and taking care of IT, it was really great to be able to look at a synthesized document. The summary document also very nice and an overview, but to kind of dive into the categorization of a bunch of the data was really helpful. Anybody see anything in that document that was surprising, or is it just like John said, kind of reaffirming of what the issues you guys kind of, and to his point for his neighborhood, you know, what you guys have already know or what you're already hearing from your neighbors and fellow community members?
Can I just ask a quick question before other folks respond to that? I'm curious, these are all worded either very neutrally or positively. And I'm wondering if that was the way that you received them. Because again, the tone at the event felt very positive, right? There wasn't like an axe to grind kind of vibe to the night or anything. So I was just personally curious about any tone that you might have read into written words. Maybe it's just that question's for Jessica, I'm not sure.
Well, it's what you're looking at is verbatim, whatever was written on a Post-it note, for example.
Okay, great. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Thanks.
Monica, go ahead. And then John, I saw you took yourself off mute as well, John. So let Monica go and then you're up next.
I would love it if you could send me that email again. I was searching last night in my emails and I couldn't find it, but I did read it when it first came in. And one thing that I saw that I thought was a nice idea was the residential preferential perks, like being able to park at a trailhead that is served by the shuttle, like if you had a residence tag or whatever. I just thought that was a useful little tidbit. I know people want to feel like the residents have, you know, are still being attended to, and that we should get some perks. And I thought that was a useful suggestion that I hadn't really heard anybody say before. But
I just forwarded it to you again.
Thank you.
Of course. Thanks, Monica. John?
Yeah, what I would say is that the database, all the comments, I think are suggestions and opinions, if to use Cynthia's way of looking at them. And then the summary, I think is good, but what I would like to just make sure is that we never lose sight of the database. Because I look at some of those individual suggestions, the one Monica just brought up is one I've heard before and is actually, as you well know, is implemented in a lot of other communities. But to give you, for instance, the freeway signage that is currently electronic, that gives the direction to Sedona through Cottonwood, the number of minutes, et cetera. I was in the meeting when one person suggested that, one person. It took almost 10 years for that ultimately to get conveyed to ADOT and happen. Now, I don't know that anyone has been able to fundamentally quantify that being helpful to our 179 problems or Cooks Hill problem of people coming in one way or the other. But my only point is let's not forget about the singular one person comment as having, this, I don't want to turn this into, okay, we're not doing that because one person said it. But I do understand that going forward, the work that Cynthia and Josh have to do to really sort this out, to make it a plan. So you've got to go from generals to particulars, which is what they're trying to do here. But I just kind of keep looking for those nuggets that are really going to be the things that continue to make us special, and the ones that really are ultimately truly helpful to solving our big problems. I'll stop there.
I have one more suggestion for Keegan or whoever's monitoring the social media. And I'm not sure when Cynthia and Josh feel that they're prepped to share some of those results with the public, but just having a slide on social media that says hey, we heard you. These are the things that came up the most regarding housing or whatnot, so that there's transparency and people can see that it really does matter when they show up and share their suggestions, that it is going somewhere. Ultimately, we are listening. I think it's important to have that transparency. Not everyone's gonna log on to a Zoom on a Wednesday at 3, but just so that they see that this is not some kind of I don't know, closed situation.
As a follow-up to that, is it our intention, if we haven't already, to just publish this document on plansedona.com? And if we haven't, is there any risk in doing that? I mean, there's people who want the synopsis, as Monica has suggested, but then go here if you want be inspired by the hundreds of great ideas from your fellow citizens. Visit the Plan Sedona website,
Now we got to back up on the agenda. Number 1.
I just need a yes or a no, Cynthia, that's all.
Yeah, so this report that SDR is putting together, so we are feeding them, for example, the spreadsheets that you saw. That will, I assume, be an attachment/appendix. And then you'll have a report with a variety of info about the entire event. And I'll let Carrie talk to that.
Thanks, Cynthia. And so that is great. That's great guidance for us, because we really wanted to know, this is a ton of information. Is this digestible for the community? If it is, we are more than willing to include it as an appendix, but we really want to make sure that the information that we're putting in the report, it includes the pictures, it includes the word cloud, it includes, the bulk of, the kinds of visioning statements people made, the mapping exercise, where those were. But I think, for me personally, and I don't live in Sedona, right? So I love the data, right? But for someone who lives there and who wants to know that their voice was heard, when we make this report, is it general themes? And we received 78 comments pertaining to improved bike and pedestrian access, like that kind of comment, or is it more general and include the appendix? And so that's where we're hoping to get some guidance, both from the city and from you all as community members and as people who chat with many community members. What do you feel is the most digestible version for folks within the community? And Keegan, I saw you had your hand up.
I really love the idea of sharing that information on social, and I agree that we'd have to really break it down into digestible chunks. It's not like, here's the results. It's like, here's one sector of results from table 1, and have a post every single week about different results and what the residents are saying. And hopefully, if you agree, like this comment, or asking for people to agree or disagree or have commentary, but breaking it into very simple themes with sharing the word cloud or sharing a photo of the comment board with post-its. So just something really easy to understand without overcomplicating it. Because if you look at all the data, it's a lot, even for me, and I was there. So I just think it'd be really awesome to just break it down into something nice and sweet.
Yeah, to that point, Keegan, I kind of envision, like for each challenge board that we had, we could talk about the challenges associated with circulation at the Y and 179, like as one post, and it could say, 25 comments pertain to this, 25. And then if you want more information, put the link to Plan Sedona so that they can go find the data, right? So that so that it is, like you said, something that's totally digestible, and we can talk, maybe we start with the vision and the word cloud. And this is your wheelhouse, right? When it comes to social media, but I do envision, and hopefully feedback from you all as well, like these different ways that the community can digest it. There's one report that's on the Plan Sedona that can be shared via, to our entire email listserv, as well as these chunks that can be on social media, as well as, oh my gosh, here's 15 pages of data. Tony, I see your hand up. Go ahead.
Yeah, I'm supportive of everything you're saying. I'm not saying to publish all 15 pages exclusive of, other things, but I think the value in doing that is, yes, it's a heck of a lot of data, but it's there as a resource if you want to see it. And as a resident that might have like an axe to grind, or might just think nobody in the city cares about this stuff, like looking at all of that information would just be really incredible. I think even if they don't take the time to read it and absorb it, it's powerful in how big it is. And then my other comment is I love where Keegan's head's going with like campaignizing this and thinking about breaking it out into little pieces. You're going to get a ton of feedback in those comments, right? And so are we prepared to take that into consideration, to John's feedback around there could be one amazing idea in the 100 people that respond to one of your posts? So are we going to be able to take advantage of that too?
Right. I think also in the different aspects of the ways I see your hand, Ernie, in the ways, the different avenues in which you display this information, it kind of opens the quote unquote black box of what's happening at the work group level. So it's, creates more transparency in, wow, we had this community meeting, we haven't seen anything. Like, what's the city doing with all this information? Well, here it is. And here's how we've synthesized it. And, here's how to get involved in the next steps where we work towards, finding solutions that are, well thought of, that are implementable, etc. Yeah, Ernie, go ahead.
We've been talking about the details as to how the information is presented. And frankly, I personally still have difficulty even finding our darn Plan Sedona work group. And in talking to people in the community, I don't know of anyone that goes directly to our Plan Sedona page and finds it there. Last time and it's been about 2 weeks. I was out of town for about a week. But last time I was there, that the link that I got to was from still the planning that went into the 2013-14 community plan. And I got to that before I got to the current one. So, and I think if your third click after you go on Sedona doesn't get you to the Plan Sedona work page with all of this info, I don't care how we try to present it, there will be so few people that ever get exposed to it. I think we have to make it simpler, easier, a two-shot bang from, you hit community, the first thing you think of is community plan. So community plan and nobody is thinking Plan Sedona, Sedona plan, whatever, it's community plan we're all thinking about. And so I think that needs to be, like step one, and then that should take you to exactly the page that contains everything. That's just my comment, because I've just talked to somebody today. No, I can't, I can't ever find anything on the website. We talked about it, and I know, frankly, I'm trying not to be critical in the sense that I do understand that we've had a lot of turnover and a lot of things happening and a lot of things doing, but it is one thing that I'm seeing is a little slow in picking up.
Okay. Thank you, Ernie. For
Thanks.
someone who came on when it was called Plan Sedona, and we've been saying Plan Sedona this whole time, it's easy for
Yeah,
me.
we know, but nobody else.
Right. So I guess that's a bigger question for Cynthia. When someone Googles community plan, does it take them to the old community plan?
Well,
is that being?
I just did it on my iPad while you're talking, and it was 2 clicks. I typed in community plan.
Yeah.
The city site popped, or it said City of Sedona Community Plan. Clicked on that, and the colorful logo is right up front and center, Plan Sedona, which takes you to the Plan Sedona site. And then we did, maybe it's not prominent enough on the Plan Sedona page. In the center, community input, participate, there's a bullet, follow the citizen work group. We can make that bold, maybe separate it out, but it is there. And if it's not there, Ernie, it could be an issue of refreshing your browser, maybe. I don't know.
Okay.
And then,
all right, and maybe that happened in the last 2 weeks too. Something.
And then just to the social media part, I mean, I'm assuming, and I haven't been following, I'm sorry. I have been trying to limit my social media intake lately. From the Plan Sedona portion, you're in charge of the City of Sedona's Facebook page. When you are posting something that's related to Plan Sedona, are you including that plansedona.com link? Just so that people can click on it from a social media and I know that this is a rabbit hole we don't need to really continue down much longer, but just making sure that if we are hoping that the community will digest this information and understand where we are in the process and how we're incorporating their feedback, these kinds of things can be important.
Let me make sure. I would assume I did that, but
like I said, I haven't.
1 second.
We have in things like the press releases, that sort of information, we always put Plan Sedona.
And then just, I think, while you're checking, Keegan, for when we update the plansedona.com website, when we do have this forward-facing document, that maybe we put it kind of up at the top and not under news and events, maybe see your input, or we heard your feedback, or something like, we heard you, and then they can see this document with all the data kind of at the top of the page, maybe under the goal of the what is the update, and then right under that, something like that, so it's kind of front and center, so that when people go there, they don't have to look for it. It kind of hits them right in the face. Yes, Anne.
Going back to your excuse me, your original question, one of the things that comments that caught my attention was a Center for Naturopathic and Community-Based Medicine. And I don't know if Molly's still on the line, but I was just curious if the Citizen Health Care Advisory Group would bring that comment into their discussion, or are they just sticking to traditional NIH medicine?
Yeah, is that all right, Carrie, if I jump in? So yes, right now we are just looking broadly at healthcare and what the gaps are, and what potential solutions could be there. I anticipate there being some type of alternative wellness solutions that might get proposed. I also see that it could also be something that lives in our economic development strategies. it's not something that we're driving at this point. We're trying to, we're trying to see what the group is coming up with, but I anticipate it might be coming forward.
Okay. So good stuff. Thanks for some of the guidance regarding, how we make this publicly digestible, and increase transparency about, what we're doing with all of this feedback. So appreciate that. Let's see, Keegan. All 3 posts since the event has said planned at sedona.com in the website. Perfect. Thank you. It's, it's hard when people are like, but it's the community plan. But why doesn't it say community plan? And like, well, it's called Plan Sedona. It's one of those things that we have to really keep saying the same thing over and over and over and over again until it sinks into all of our brains, right? All right. Sorry, I'm trying to get back to our agenda here. Yeah, so any other folks with, after having looked at the data, were there any, surprises in quantity of types of comments, in potential solutions, in, aside, Tony, great to hear that, you thought that most comments were positive, which is great. We were hoping for that, right? That we're kind of limiting, everybody knows that there's challenges and we're trying to limit to focus on solutions and the positive. Anybody else have anything that they wanted to mention based on the data? All right. Well, why don't we're a little bit early for a break, but why don't we take a break? And then when we come back, we'll dive into what's the next round, right? Like to your point, John, we don't want to do the planning for the next round of a community engagement at the 11th hour. We want to make sure that they're well planned and well marketed, and so that we continue to have really robust engagement. So let's dive into that when we get back from the break. If everybody could be back at 4, that would be fantastic. Okay, 4 o'clock. I hope everybody got a snack or a little bio break or a stretch break. So, we were fortunate enough to have Cynthia and Josh come to Flagstaff. When was that? I don't know. It felt like it was yesterday. It also felt like it was a year ago, maybe 2 weeks ago. To kind of, it's something like you all know, and like the folks of Sedona like to do some work in person. So it was nice to have Cynthia and Josh in town. We kind of talked about what's next for public engagement. And so we came up with, and we sent it to you, and that's kind of our next thought here is the 2 different kinds of public engagement, recognizing there are some topics that are ripe for listening and learning, virtual. There's a lot of information to share there. We know that there is a lot of desire for lots of communication back and forth, but there's some things that are, there's lots of plans in motion. And so they're more, I don't want to say static because they're not static, but there's some things that are kind of concrete moving forward. And those lend themselves to a more virtual listening and learning session. While given the data that we accumulated at the September 7th and the recognition that people want to meet in person, there's some topics that really lend themselves to grinding through some things in person, topical workshops. So I'm going to share my screen. Hopefully this doesn't seem totally new to you guys. This is kind of our outline for community engagement for 2022 and 2023. Can everybody see this? Yeah.
Yes.
Great. So hopefully you guys all got a chance to look at this. We have a lot of, a lot more information we can provide for these sessions if you guys are interested in that or have questions. But we have these 4 topics for listening and learning virtual recorded sessions. That is Sedona in Motion, which is transportation related. That's streets and traffic, that's bicycle and pedestrian, and that's transit. And so that is one virtual listening and learning session. And we can go back and do all the details for each after I get through kind of reviewing which ones are going to be primarily virtual.
Carrie,
Then there is, yes.
when did you send this? I'm looking at the September 29th email and I don't.
Ooh, you know what? Maybe I didn't send it. Maybe our intention was to screen share it. There you go. I felt like we were on the edge of sending this, and then we were like, there's so much information. There's 15 pages of data and an agenda and a summary report. So you're right.
Okay. All right. So make sure I didn't miss anything.
Yeah, no, you're correct. Apologies. I think John, hopefully that's him joining. He said he was going to join by phone after the break. Okay. So given that you haven't seen this before, we have 4 primarily virtual listening and learning sessions. Sedona in Motion, focusing on all things transportation, transit, circulation related. Enjoy the Outdoors, which is parks and outdoor recreation. So this is parks and recreation within the city. This is OHV use and policy in the forest. And this is like national forest recreation. So this is like trails, access, trailheads, also parks and recreation within city limits. So that's that one. Then we have kind of protecting wild and scenic Sedona. This is environment and open space. There were lots of comments, as I'm sure many of you saw in the data, about water conservation, user impacts, development as it pertains to effects on the environment. So that's where we focused on that one. And then the last one, and this is something that Molly brought up earlier, and this is enhancing community vitality. None of these titles are set in stone. These were our ideas. And this is diversifying Sedona's economy, regional economy, and healthcare. So those are the top. Sure.
Yeah. Was housing? Did I miss housing?
Right.
somewhere?
So that's one so these were the 4 that lend themselves to kind of a virtual environment, recognizing this isn't the only time people are going to get to talk about them is in a virtual environment. These might be subsequent focus groups, but first round virtual. Then we also have these in-person workshops, and this is kind of like a livable community, Sedona quality of life. We haven't obviously settled on a name for these. And this is 3 workshops. So that's where I was heading, Tony. We did the 4 virtual listening and learning ones first, and I'll go through these 3, and then I'm going to have a long pause so you guys can all ask me to scroll back up, think about things, questions. The first one then is balancing environment, tourism, and community. This is like a tourism management, supporting community by managing tourism, that blend that is Sedona of residents and tourists. And really kind of getting at deconstructing a little bit that us versus them, right? So that's workshop number 1. Workshop number 2 is shaping the built environment. That is land use and housing. This is housing diversity regarding workforce housing, affordable housing, a variety of options of housing, as well as lodging, demand, and opposition, and how that relates to short-term vacation rentals. That's a really big one. And we felt like because of the sheer quantity and types of comments, this really lends itself to an in-person, really talk about these issues and work towards really viable solutions. Then the last one, we thought, that lends itself to a great in-person workshop is this celebrating community, right? There are lots of comments, positive comments about arts, about the cultural park, about the sense of community that Sedona has. And we felt like that could really lend itself to kind of an open house, interactive stations, how do you participate in your community? Kind of, a little bit more feel good type workshop. I'm going to pause there and I'm going to scroll back up to the top. And then I'm going to ask Jessica to help me for people who have their hands raised.
Can I add also that these aren't necessarily in the order that they should happen? Like, for example, we're talking about the first two in-person workshops possibly happening first. So.
Great. Thank you. Thank you, Cynthia, for mentioning that. Yes, Ernie, it's your hand up.
Unmute. Sedona in the past has also always used something called a small town character, okay, as a phrase. And I think it appears in our current community plan something like 16 times or something like that. That may be an exaggeration, but I know it's there frequently. So because we tend to use that in Sedona, and I see on social media lots of comments and concerns about the loss and the change in Sedona's quote small town character, and we're now urbanizing according to many. I'm wondering whether that would be an item under protecting the wild and scenic, or the next one then down was community vitality, but that's economics, and I'm not sure that community characters fits this, but people have an idea of what the character of Sedona is, and that's really what's reflected in our word thing that we got at the Sedona. It's primarily beauty, nature, community, natural beauty, etc. That's our quote community character. So where are we going to talk about that?
So I can respond to that.
Okay.
I keep trying to scroll and it's not moving. Carrie, scroll. Anyway, that would be under workshop 1, which if you all remember from the community plan where we talk about ETC, environment, tourism, and community. So we're gonna probably still use that, because what we keep hearing from the community is just what you described, Ernie. And we want to try to open up that whole conversation, which example would be, how do you define small town character? And we have run into this in other, even 10 years ago, but people like to use that and they might put that in their comments, as you've seen. But what does that mean? And so that right there is an example of why this might be a good in-person workshop, because we would like to know from people how you define that.
Okay.
Because it means different things to different people.
Yep. I agree. You never know exactly what they're talking about. And so.
Great. Thank you for that clarification, Cynthia, and thank you for that comment. I hope you saw that I added it right there, Ernie.
Okay, I see it.
Yeah. Other thoughts? Would it be more useful to kind of go back to the top of the page and kind of go all the way across, like who we had anticipated for speakers, what kind of content notes we have, etc. for each session? I'm happy to kind of craft this the best way that you all would like to discuss this. I do see your hand, Anne, so go ahead.
Well, going back to listening and learning, at the bottom it says work group member role, and there's nothing there yet. So my question is, so it's a Zoom meeting and folks come to that meeting and they listen to everything that these folks have to say. And then what? Is it thank you for coming today, goodbye? Or do you agree, disagree? What would the exchange be?
Right. And so the listening and learning sessions are really formatted similar to the very first time we talked about that. And I recognize that was a while ago, that it's listening and learning both ways, right? So if we go back to the top one and we're talking about transit, transportation, etc., there are a lot of things that are happening, right? There's these transportation plans, there's the Go Sedona plan, there's the transit implementation plan. And that's when the city is really trying to ground citizens in the learning about what's happening, right? But that's not where it ends. Each session has a couple of key questions that we queue up for the participants that get at getting information to the city that they find useful, that the planners can use to continue with the issues identification, working towards solutions. So it's not just a webinar where you come and you listen and you log off. That's not the intention. The intention is that there's discussion and that then the listeners are the city, right? So initially the participants, community members are listening to the city give a presentation and they're learning, and then vice versa, the city is listening and learning to the responses for key questions for each session from the community members.
So if 40 people, 60 people
Mhm.
show up for the Sedona in Motion,
Mhm.
how are you going to allow them to give input without every one of them having to speak?
Gosh, Anne, we are giving a training on facilitation tomorrow where we talk about this on Zoom, where we have people in breakout groups. So it's kind of the small group mentality in person, but we allow people to pick breakout groups that they would like to join based on specific topics, or we assign them at random, making sure that we split everybody equally into 4, or depending on the number of participants, however many make sense, so that they can have smaller constructive discussions and hear everybody within their group speak. And then they report back out, everybody comes back to this large session, and each small group has someone that reports out on the key takeaways, the salient issues or the salient solutions from each small group. Does that
My
make
last
sense?
question, how long would this session be?
We, I think, had anticipated an hour and a half, correct, Cynthia? So that the present, it's not death by PowerPoint. It's not like, oh my gosh, we're sitting through like 60 minutes of presentation. Oh my gosh, that's a lot, right? We want to have a balance of the learning from the community, but also have a balance of them being able to chat with their fellow community members and provide input, kind of half and half. So recognizing there's introductions, we want to make sure that if you all would like, if there's a topic that makes the most, that you feel passionate about, that you could introduce, the speakers or introduce the topic. We want to make sure that you guys have a role as well, as far as, you guys are helping guide us in the community engagement realm. So if you should feel so inclined and want to speak in front of your community members in a virtual setting, you're more than welcome to do that. And we can refine what those roles look like. But the welcome, the introduction, presentation, and then small group activities is kind of the format. Does that answer everything adequately, Anne?
It does. I've seen the Sedona in Motion presentations to the city council and they go on for hours. So I'm just trying to figure out how they'll do it in an hour and a half with people having time for breakout and summation and all of the above.
We're gonna have Andy and Carrie coach them.
That's when we get the fun job of saying you have a limit of 6 slides and you have a limit of 3 minutes per slide. More or less, right? Because we want to make sure that if people are coming and they want to do a Sedona in Motion and maybe they don't necessarily care that much about bicycles and pedestrians, but they really care about transit, or they really care about the streets and traffic, that they're not hearing about something the entire presentation and it never gets to the thing that they care about. So yes, to Cynthia's point, that's a big part of our role.
I would also add that we would like to send out information. So if a participant has to register in advance, then we can email them either a link to information on Plan Sedona or send them a PDF document as background information that they can look at in advance if they want, because we know not everybody reads things.
Right. Great point. And thank you for clarifying that, Cynthia. These would be on Zoom, and we really like to know how many people we're expecting. So yes, we like to have these be a registration. We're not limiting who can register. We're not filtering who can register, but it gives us an idea of how many people. And it also lets us, kind of front load them with some information for some other things that, it might be good to send them out a 2-3 question survey ahead of time so that we can gauge what kind of questions we ask them in a breakout group. Those are the kinds of things that we do. And that's why we have people register for these events. All right, Ernie, I see your hand up.
Yes, I scrolled down a little bit. I'm looking to see where parking, would that fit into the SIM plan? Or did I miss it further on down?
Oh,
I don't see it, but I think,
So it
I
depends
think-
on what type of parking.
oh boy, all kind, that
Yeah,
is,
so we've got
that's
like.
almost worth a workshop in its
know.
own. There's so
Which-
much
Yeah.
concern about the uptown garage, the the chapel overflow, the one at Mystic Trails, the Little Horse, everything is overflowing, and nobody has any real good solutions. But if we don't even have it on our pointed out anywhere on the list, I think that would be considered a major overlook. So perhaps it just goes point number 4 under the SIM plan, but
It will be part of the SIM discussion, but if it's trailhead specific, then it's probably going to be under the parks and outdoor recreation, as well as that, I'll call it the ETC category about tourism and resident balance.
no, I think it's a little bit more because everything in transportation ends up being, where do we put the cars? The
Mhm.
cars aren't going to stop coming.
Right.
So the plan, or a theory in the plan that a lot of people are wondering how we really accomplish, including the city manager, is getting large parking lots at the entrances on 179 and 89A, both north and southwest. So, and one of them is somewhat under discussion. The other two have no real plan. So, but you can't talk about transit unless you figure where you're going to have the cars that are going to generate the people to go on the bus. And then they have to get back to their car, and, so do you haul them into the center of town and then and then disperse them and then bring them back to the center of town, so they have to go back out the same crowded highways? So it's a large part, I think, of the transportation area is what do you do? Where do you put the cars? If you're going to try to get pedestrians that come from Phoenix and want to hike. It's not just all Sedona residents. So that means they have cars. Where are they going to put the cars? We got 200 and some hiking trails in Sedona. Where do we park the cars for them?
So, yeah, you're highlighting a very, what we like to call a cross-cutting issue. It affects a lot of different parts of the topics that we're considering. So thank you for highlighting that. And you'll see that I put it down here. It belongs in many categories. This is a work in progress, and it is what you guys are helping us do is refine that. So, we also want to make sure that not every topic is bombarded with parking. right? We want to make sure that people talk about parking, but that there's also, we get to the other substantive issues, recognizing that parking allows for a lot of these things. So thank you, Ernie, for bringing that up, and we'll do our best and work with the city to make sure that it gets plugged in where it belongs. And that might be in multiple sessions.
Yeah, it's just that Andy Dickey seems to have a lot of handle on the issue, and the only place I saw him strongly was number one in Sedona in Motion, so.
Right. And, and that might be conversations with him as well as to, how best do we address this in other topics, right? So yeah, thank you for that, Ernie, and we'll make sure to keep up with making sure it's plugged in the right places.
Okay.
Other questions, comments, things that you're like, wow, I didn't even see that. Thanks for bringing up parking, Ernie. Other topics that you aren't seeing that you wish you were seeing in different places. We recognize that because people really like to meet in person, we'll probably be doing topical workshops and virtual learning and listening sessions kind of staggered kind of within the same time frame, as opposed to all of one, stop, all of another. We might be doing topical workshop, listening and learning, topical workshop, listening and learning. We haven't really figured out quite the staggered timeline for that, recognizing we want this to happen in fall 2020 to early winter 2023. We're also trying to make sure that we have the appropriate speakers from the city of Sedona who are the city experts who can speak to things, to these specific topics, as well as folks who are engaged in efforts as they pertain to how the city and national forests or city and other organizations cross over. So you'll see that there are folks from the city of Sedona and folks with levels of expertise in these topics from outside the city as speakers. We see that creates quite a bit more buy-in and quite a bit more trust from community members sometimes when they see a city staff paired with someone from an organization that they know and trust if they are lacking, trust and transparency from the city. Plus, it makes it so that, everybody's trying to work towards a comprehensive community plan update, right? Not just the city. We're just going to have a real long pause here to see if anybody has other feedback. Monica.
I have a question. Is it considered a conflict of interest to invite a business owner, like let's say the Thunder Mountain Bikes crew, to speak at the Sedona in Motion thing, or not that I think it would go over well, but somebody who rents off-road vehicles, like, I don't know, is that a conflict of interest?
No, okay, I'm unmuted. So for example, when we did the Go Sedona bicycle pedestrian plan, we had a lot of public involvement. We had, focus type groups. So that business and other businesses were involved in the planning in that respect. So we certainly have businesses are a stakeholder in these things. But for the listening and learning, one of the things that we are struggling with is like transportation is a huge topic with so many different facets that we're going to be challenged to squeeze that into one listening and learning session. And so just the number of speakers is going to be a challenge. But I would also hope that we will probably send out invites and say, hey, Mike from the bike shop, can you join in and be our participant at least in that session. But also, and this is where we're looking for your feedback. Should we be splitting that up into two or three different learning sessions? But we're also trying to balance how much time, like John was saying earlier, we kind of want to get to the meat of it. But we know that we kind of need to do this for the educational side of it. So this is kind of necessary for that real more important discussion of strategies.
Great. Thank you for fielding that, Cynthia. And that cues up, that point about like everything that we're doing ideally is building on things, right? So we had this community forum where we got a bunch of feedback, right? And then we're having listening and learning where we're using the information that we got from the forum to craft, more in-depth questions for the listening and learning sessions and for these topical workshops. And then when we start thinking about, does bicycle and pedestrian, is that like a necessary focus group next? Using all the information that's garnered from the listening and learning from the community forum, then it's like, okay, these focus groups, that's when we invite specifically, Monica, to your point, like those really embedded, those stakeholders who are business owners or who are outfitters and guides who are taking people on tours, or they run the local chapter of the mountain biking association, whatever the case may be. Those then are just in that focus group, right? And they're the ones who are coming in and really taking, getting a presentation on all this information. And then they're really focusing on how do we get towards solutions. So I get where you're coming from asking, is it a conflict of interest? And I don't know if that's a yes or no answer, but I think that it's important that we engage those folks. It's just about where, right? And when is the most appropriate and the most fruitful for their feedback. Does that make sense? Okay.
Can
Other
you scroll
input
down?
from y'all? Go ahead, Cynthia.
Well, can you just scroll down so we can at least stare at the next page?
Absolutely.
Oh, it's not all on one page.
It's, there's a lot of things happening here. There's a lot of information.
So-
It keeps making the cells bigger and bigger.
So on the workshop one, I feel like that's the one where we've had the most kind of discussion, debate as to how to handle this particular topic. Because when you go through the comments, and this is something that we'll get out of the database where we can actually maybe have numbers, percentages, et cetera. This is something that we hear constantly, not just in like, say, survey feedback, but even just in our daily jobs of I don't know how else to word it, but the resident versus tourist thing. And from 10 years ago, the way it was handled during that planning process was this whole ETC idea, which nothing's really exchanged, I feel like, except for the sheer volume of tourists is very different. And then, of course, the whole short-term rental thing has changed the game a lot. So my thought was that we kind of use that same terminology, and one of the buckets that we put the resident versus tourist discussion in is this category. And if you all have recommendations, speakers, panelists for this particular topic, this is a good one where there's no city expert on this. So suggestions are definitely welcome on that.
Brian.
Yeah. I mean, I don't have names to give you, but I mean, it's going to be explosive to have Michelle Conway as one of the speakers. I mean, she cannot be seen as a dominant speaker amongst multiple speakers, or it's just going to be viewed as some kind of a propaganda session. by the chamber, by, a portion of the community. So, you
We
know,
also don't want to set somebody up to be attacked as
that's
well.
right. That's right. Frankie Reamer in our September 7th kickoff meeting, put up that slide about, here's what community-centered tourism is. Like, that needs a ton of unpacking, right? And, maybe she actually could make some suggestions of some other folks to bring in that could be part of that discussion. But there's got to be more than two, because, yeah, it just, I agree that Michelle has a place there, but, it's potentially explosive.
Yeah, we went back and forth with this with Cynthia, and it was, to your point, it's essential that she's there, right? But everyone within the same time frame, right? So that it's not seen as only community focused, no tourists, and it's not seen as only tourist focused, not, so that we're really trying to strike that balance. So noted. Thank you, Brian. Yeah, Monica.
Well, I have a thought about who does the Sedona Main Street, like who's in charge of the trick or treating? Would somebody like that be?
There used to be an organized Main Street group, and they disbanded, I don't know, 6 years ago or something. Yeah.
And then another idea, and again, I don't know if she would want to do this or if it would be a negative, look for the wider community, but Wendy Littman or somebody from Tlaquepaque, they have these free community events, and it used to be like, oh, you would go there and taste the chili cook-off from people around the community, and now I live very close to Tlaquepaque. Sometimes we walk over to the free events that they have, which are so beautiful. It's such a nice asset here, but it's like completely filled with people I've never seen. I wonder if she could speak on that. I don't know. This is just like, I'm just spitballing here, because it's a great thing for the community, but it's balancing, the tourists with the community.
It's Wendy Lipman.
Sorry, thank you.
With P. I would just say that she's also a potential lightning rod as well, for different reasons. But these are the people that need to be at the table when we are in more of the focus group sessions, definitely.
Yeah, Marcy, just like I see Marcy's hand up first, and then you, Ernie. Go ahead, Marcy.
Thanks. On the community side, I know we already have Jan for the fun community one, but Judy Poe is excellent and very community oriented at the library. I don't know if she's another choice or if that's too much library. And how does the Hotel and Lodging Council play into this at all? Again, they have some lightning rod members, but they drive a lot of policy in this area. And so to not have them involved in some way, and not that they have to be, I don't know, they are the Hotel and Lodging Council. So they have a very vested interest in this conversation. So just a suggestion that there might be someone from there that might be appropriate to be on this panel. Thank you.
Just thank you. Cynthia, I'll let you reply, and then we're going to do Ernie and then Brian.
No, I was just going to say, we've got on the list Al Camello with Lodging Council. And that's the kind of thing where we need to follow up with them directly, because there could be any number of people from their organization present.
But wouldn't he be more for the tour? Wouldn't that be more tourism oriented than housing? I'm not sure what Al's involvement is with housing. And he's also the president of the board of the chamber right now, I think.
Yeah.
No, he's not anymore. It's Jennifer Perry.
Oh, thank you. I'm sorry.
But he was for a long time.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah, and a lot of these individuals wear many hats or have in the past. that sort of thing. But the lodging council would be one perspective, and that's the other thing to keep in mind on how we want to structure these, and why we'll probably call them panelists, is that we're going to have information from different perspectives. And the lodging council will be obviously from a tourism perspective. And so we've got the two big items are housing and lodging on the discussion. And so Karen and I can present about lodging, the more zoning perspective, the new development perspective, and the lodging council will have their perspective. And then, of course, housing, we're going to have Shannon, and I think Shannon's on the line if she wants to add anything about that, because that in itself can be its own workshop. And that will be our next challenge, is to figure out how to structure these. So we don't leave anything out, but there's a lot to cover.
Yeah. We also, we recognize that putting multiple topics in one workshop has benefits. So it also has challenges, that each one of these topics could be its own workshop, right? Okay, like I said, it's going to be Ernie and then Brian. And then I want to hear from anybody else who hasn't had a chance or hasn't, spoken up today, just to see if there's any feedback. We recognize this is a new document for you guys. Our intention is likely to send it out with a comment option, so you guys can highlight things, add comments, add potential speakers, etc. We just wanted to kind of be able to, introduce this to you all. Okay, go ahead, Ernie.
Okay, if you scroll back up to the number one. Okay, so we have, and this has been fairly well put out there to the community, this balance of environment, tourism, and community. And initially we had pretty much, I didn't feel that we were quite as strong on community, maybe more in environment. But how about the director of the Sedona Community Center? That's Meals on Wheels and all kinds of activities for, it used to be the senior center. Now they broadened it, expanded the scope. So that's, I can't remember her name, but offhand. Okay, that was it. And so I think if we focused, 1/3, 1/3, 1/3, basically divided up environment, tourism, community, there we've got it. And whatever time you want to allow, divide by 3, and that makes it pretty evenly handed, if you will. If the chamber on tourism wanted to take their time and divide it in 2, one being the tourism and one just general, commercial activity, we could suggest doing that.
Thank you, Ernie. I'm sorry. I'm following the chat here. Just there's some good stuff here in the chat. I know you're next, Brian, I promise. And then I think I saw Anne take herself off mute earlier as well. As far as how we deal with lightning rods, these are also these topical workshops highly and heavily facilitated. So making sure that everyone, like they said, has equal time. We're very diligent about that. We have strong working agreements when people come in, and recognize we are working towards solutions, recognizing there are many challenges surrounding these issues. But again, these are things that we can't not hear from people, right? Because they are members of the community. They have strong stake in the community as well. So really trying to balance that out. And so thank you all for your feedback on potential speakers. And yes, to your point about nonprofits being stakeholders in this community as well. So that's why we will continue to garner your feedback on names. I'm going to let Brian go while I read the rest of this chat.
Okay, so I do have a suggestion for this workshop one. Cheryl Barron She's on the board, I think, of both the Lodging Council and the Chamber. And she owns the Whispering Creek, I think it is, B&B on Jordan Road in Uptown. She was the general manager at the Marriott Courtyard, long career in hospitality industry. Super balanced individual, and it's Barron, Barron. She's going to shoot me for suggesting her, but she would be really good for this. Highly recommend her.
Thank you, Brian. All right. And I saw you came off mute. You turned your camera on. Did you have some input you wanted to provide as well?
Well, for this first one, I think the point was made that we have these two phrases that have been brought up: the community centered tourism and the balance. And so to me, this session is putting everybody who's there in breakout groups to start putting words around what does that mean to them? You know, what is balance between tourism, environment, and community, and what does community-centered tourism mean? So I mean, all these speakers, it just reads to me like they're going to tell us what the right answer is, versus they could be facilitators in different breakout groups where people would be forced to say, okay, to you resident, what does community-centered tourism mean? What does having a balance mean? We've got to get the residents to be forced. They can sit there and complain, you know, or they can put the words around it so that we can recognize if we're achieving it or not.
And this is one reason I wanted to talk more about this one, because unlike the listening and learning, which especially the virtual sessions, those are where we can say, here's what we are doing, and we're super busy with it right now. But this is an area that it's fallen between the cracks, honestly. So that's why we don't know exactly who are the best speakers, and it is going to be different from those other sessions, because it'll be a completely different discussion. This is like, what do we need to be doing that we aren't doing?
Brian, go ahead. And then I want to make sure that we leave time for public comment, and then we get to kind of what we're asking from you all, from like constructive feedback, so we can synthesize that and really report back on how we're going to outline these at the in-person session in 2 weeks. So go ahead, Brian.
Yeah, you know, last month there was this sustainable tourism film series held at the film festival location. And I only had an opportunity to see one of them, but there was definitely a lot of good food for thought through those. So it would be kind of interesting, perhaps, if there was a Cliff Notes version of those various films that could somehow be shared, because I don't, you know, in the one that I saw, like, there was no silver bullet about how to deliver community-centered tourism, but, you know, we are absolutely not alone in being overrun, right?
Yeah.
And so, you know, I know we don't have time to do like the whole redo of those films, but if there was some way to get sort of the Cliff Notes version and share that with people, even for us just to have access to that, I think would be rather valuable. So just my 2 cents.
Good idea. Mhm.
Does anyone have a contact with the film festival folks?
Oh, sure.
Actually, Pete Furman was on the part of the community that was on today. I don't know if he's still on or not, but I think he was part of it. I can, well.
I'll follow up on that one.
Thanks, Cynthia.
Yeah, I was gonna say, Cynthia, you obviously know Pete.
Yeah. Thanks, Brian. Okay. So before we get to public comment, so this was kind of our initial, your initial glance at this and the content, and we're headed in the right direction of providing a you know, like a really robust list of folks, right? We're going to do our best to kind of refine a little bit about what the goals of each one of these would be, because we need to make sure that we're moving from this information gathering strongly towards what are future recommendations for how to deal with a lot of these issues, right? So we'll be doing that. We'll make sure that this document is readable and like really organized for you all, and then we'll send it to you guys all in the Google document form, and we'll make it so that you guys can comment. So everyone can see everyone's comments. If you guys have comments about potential speakers, about format, about timing, about, oh my gosh, this is too much to handle in one, we need to break this up. Also recognizing we're still on a fixed timeline and we're trying to get all this information, to the public and get information from the public at the same time. So I know that's a lot to digest, but we really are happy to have your feedback, and it's important in helping how we craft these things. So that's on us to send this to you all with the comment option. That sound good? That way we can really, finalize the plan for how this is going to roll out moving forward. Okay, that being said, we have 12 minutes. I would like to stop sharing because I feel like I would like an option to not have to scroll. So yes, I see that, Mark, you have your hand up, and then, but before we get to you, sorry. Tony, do you have something to add based on what I just mentioned there?
Well, I just want to add an agenda item for next time, which is to talk about, what is the reach that we want to get and feedback from the city, from the residents as well, because we could go through all this and only have 1,200 people. And some people may think that's amazing. Some people may think that's really lacking. So it'd just be worth having a conversation, because I don't think we set goals around that in the beginning of the process.
Right. Thank you for bringing that back up. Apologies that I have it written down right here. Points of success. What is it? And I didn't get to it. So thank you for the reminder, Tony. I appreciate it. So we'll make sure that is on the agenda, and thank you for bringing it up again, something that you all should think about as we move forward through this, right? Like, there may be things that the city has regarding what they think engagement success is. We, as a facilitation company, have ideas of what engagement success looks like, but it would be great to hear from you all about what that means, what that looks like, and how we get there. So thanks again. Mark, go ahead, public comment.
Thank you. Just want to kind of pile on what Ernie said, that as a member of the public, it's kind of hard to find things on the site. And there's a participate button, but I haven't been getting emails lately. And it also seems like, at least on the website or by email, the public should be able to get the same information for transparency's sake as the rest of the committee does. So everything that you're sending out, I think it'd be great to be able to send that to different people. In terms of the different breakout sessions, I think also Ernie brought this up as well. There's that cross-cutting issue of induced demand. We're building more roads, or at least there's a push to do that, more parking and other things, the potential of more lodging and so forth. And I think we need to bring up the whole topic of, if we build more, we're going to have more people, and that could essentially lead to more congestion and other problems that people are complaining about. So somehow that needs to be spread between those different topics. And then finally, when it comes, and this is way down the road, when it comes to the final or drafts of this plan, there was some talk early on about subgroups of members getting together and drafting or redrafting different sections. I wondered if that's ultimately the way this will work, because I think there's so many good specialized people with good ideas that might be the way to get a good first draft. So I just would kind of throw that out there as a suggestion. That's all.
Thanks, Mark. Anyone else from the public? It looks like there's a couple people on the phone. I know one of which is John Sather, and then we have another person on the phone with the number that ends in 1981, and then we have Kathy as well. Either of you have comment? Okay, wait long enough so that if they needed to get off mute, they could. All right, that rounds us out. I don't know if Cynthia, you have any last words for us? Nobody balks at getting out of a meeting 8 minutes early, unless you want to fill that 8 minutes, Cynthia. The floor is
No,
yours.
I will not fill the 8 minutes. I'll try to keep it to less than 1. We did set up the e-notify. If you don't know what that is, you can go on the website. Maybe I should just send an email, but we added Plan Sedona to the list. Even if you have signed up for e-notify in the past, hopefully you checked community development, because you will now get emails about these meetings. Otherwise, if you can go back in and fill in your name and check the box for Plan Sedona. I got the reminder email, I think it was yesterday or day before. So it is working. And we did make some other changes. It's appearing on our front page under new or events. It's on the event calendar. So if you do want to receive notices or you're not getting them, Mark mentioned that, I would suggest signing up for the e-notify.
I just noticed there was a comments section on the plansedona.com website. I'm wondering if we get anything interesting through that at all.
We have not been getting much.
Okay. Because I was thinking the other day, it'd be fun to have like a poll, you know, the minute you come to this page, there'd be a quick poll that you could take, you know, similar to some of the things Keegan mentioned, just to grab feedback from folks quickly, but maybe it just needs to be at the top of the page instead of the bottom. I don't know.
Yeah.
I wonder, I don't know if this is relevant. I feel like I'm taking up too much time today, but do we have any numbers on how many of the short-term rental owners have taken up the city on the 10 grand or the, you know, for turning it into a long-term rental?
0. I don't know if Shannon's still on, but
No.
Yeah,
Yes,
I'm
she-
sorry. I just got something in my eye right when you said that. So we don't really expect to have any applications before probably October 1st. We rolled out the program on September 1st, and it requires that properties have been a short-term rental and then find a local tenant. So people will have to have time to stop accepting reservations from for the short-term rental and, you know, honor presumably the reservations they already have before they can actually convert. So we don't have any applications yet, but maybe one pending I just talked to somebody about, so.
Thanks, Shannon. All right. Anything else from the work group? All right, we're out of here 5 minutes early. Thank you all for your participation this evening. We appreciate it. More coming your way.
Thank you.
Have a great night. Thank you.
Thank
Everyone,
you.
thanks.
Thank you.
Well.